I think the fellowship, it probably has made me a better journalist.
It was a stepping stone to allow myself to do some reporting that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do.
The Michael Gordon Fellowship has allowed me to create a series of feature articles about how refugees are faring in regional communities. So it's actually funded travel and accommodation costs for me to go everywhere from Toowoomba in regional Queensland to Bendigo in Victoria. I also interviewed refugees in Armidale, New South Wales, and really talked to them about how welcome they feel and also the roadblocks that they continue to face.
So the Michael Gordon Fellowship for me was about the opportunity to do a project that I hadn't been able to work on or wouldn't have been able to work on without the funding. So I guess for me as an entry-level journalist and someone that's just come into the industry, it's not easy to get huge amounts of money to do big projects and to do stuff that's relatively ambitious. And so I guess for me it provided a real big opportunity.
A part of journalism that my dad loved the most was the mentorship aspect. He loved working with young like-minded journalists that he could see the same kind of views and values in as himself. We love the fact that this fellowship can give the next generation of those journalists a chance that maybe they wouldn't have with where the industry is going.
I think being able to sit down with some of these sources and really, sometimes even share some food across the kitchen table before we get started with an interview has allowed me to really scratch past the surface of what's going on for these communities of refugees in regional Australia and some of the roadblocks they continue to face.
So it gave me the opportunity to go up to Darwin and spend 2 weeks with the Tiwi Bombers Football Club and look at the work that they've done in the community. In 2006, the Tiwi Islands had the highest suicide rate per head of capita in the world, and one of the responses to that was to set up a football club. So obviously the idea was to put this story in the context of skyrocketing numbers of Indigenous suicides nationwide and kind of look at whether this could be an approach that could be used elsewhere, and then to look more in depth at what the club actually does.
It's incredibly important that Australians hear about these issues and they're continually brought to the agenda of national politics. I think recently we saw some of Dad's closest friends in Nauru finally getting medevaced, and that was through the persistent efforts of people advocating on their behalfs. And I really do believe where we can continue to bang down the door through advocacy, we can bring about change.
I think at a time when so many journalists and organisations are struggling to gain funding to tell stories, I think that it's so valuable to have a fellowship that will fund journalists to really get out there and tell stories that might otherwise not see the light of day. This is an opportunity worth applying for. You might surprise yourself. I didn't necessarily think that I'd get this funding, and I did, and it's made me a better journalist. It's allowed me to tell stories that I hope really give a voice to a community that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be able to tell their stories in the same way.